fund that you just had. Did you find a way to put a lot of that to work yet?
Yeah, it's actually, as we grow, we keep investing in our deployment, which is the big, driver of our business. If you look at the last couple of years, as our dry powder has grown, so has our deployment, almost one for one. So we need to keep investing in new products, new markets, people, et cetera, which we're doing organically and inorganically. So my expectation is deployment will pick up in 2025. M&A market feels like it's picking back up. Transaction volumes are accelerating. So we had a really good year, but I think 2025 is setting up to be another good year.
What role is M&A going to play? There's an expectation of this big return, but of course you have a lot of concerns from private equity sponsors still out there. There's also a lot of uncertainty around interest rates, particularly if those Trump tariffs come to play.
I think that is the big question in my mind for 25 is the trajectory for rates and the impact of tariffs. We have believed and now continue to believe that rates will stay higher for longer. That's actually really good for our private credit businesses just because we capture all of that excess return. It's not so good for the M&A market. And so I think 2025 will have to strike that balance. That said, there's a lot of pent-up demand to transact, right? You have people that have largely been sitting on the sidelines for 24 months plus. The capital that they manage has, a timestamp on it. It needs to get invested. It needs to get returned to their investors. So I think it's more important that we have rate stability at this point as opposed to needing to see rates come down dramatically in order to see the transaction volumes.
But do investors have it totally wrong? You look at the expectations for rate cuts, you get to as low as 3.5%. And do we get there? Or do you think that there's actually a risk that rates go higher next year?
I don't know if there's a risk that they go higher. I think that there's a real possibility that they stay high. A lot needs to go right or wrong, depending on which side of the market you're in, to see them actually move back up. But I think that there's a real strong case to be made that they will stay higher for longer and probably higher than the forward curve is predicting. But again, we've lived in a 3.5% and 4% base rate environment before. And so it's not as though the markets can't function well there. The key is how do we transition? And we're already beginning to see, the markets transitioning to the new cost of capital. And that's really all you need to see volumes pick up.
Now, Mike, a week ago, the big elephant in the room,
yep.
HPS sells to BlackRock.
Yeah.
Huge deal in the industry. What did you make of it? From where you're sitting, do you think that it changes the competitive landscape in a significant way?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm super happy for all of them. I think it's a great partnership, two great companies coming together. I don't know if it necessarily changes the competitive landscape, right? If I look at, we've been in this business for 30 years, and we've seen our competitors get bought before. We've seen Oak Hill get bought by T. Rowe. We saw Antares get bought by CPP. We saw Churchill get bought by Nuveen, right? That doesn't necessarily change the competitive dynamic. I think the competitors are the competitors. More importantly, from my lens, and maybe it's self-serving, I view it as a real validation of the competitive advantages that you create through scale in private credit, right? So when a company as well-positioned as BlackRock chooses to buy HPS for 30 times, it's really, for me, a validation of the private credit, investment thesis. And so viewed through that lens, I think it's a great thing.
What does this make of consolidation across the industry? You yourself have been a significant consolidator, but you have looked really outside that traditional private credit business of late. You went into real estate in a much bigger way, for example. Does that mean that the direct lending businesses, as we know it, is kind of at its peak, and you need to look elsewhere to consolidate in order for the real growth in private markets?
I don't think so. From the Ares perspective, I don't think so. We are capturing a growing share of a growing market in the core corporate lending business, but we're also seeing the opening up of new markets, real estate lending, asset-based lending, infrastructure lending. We're globalizing the business, so we have a significant runway in Europe and Asia. So even if people believe that there's a maturation in the core US direct lending business, that's really just a small fraction of the investable market. And we've already set ourselves up to grow in other parts of the world. I do think, though, that consolidation in asset management will continue. We have learned over the last 10 or 20 years, size matters in this business. You need to be able to invest in growth, origination, portfolio management, technology, fundraising, and that's a sizable investment. And so the big will get bigger. They'll do it organically, but they'll also fill in gaps in their product set and capability by making acquisitions as well.
Well, speaking of those other capabilities, you're talking about real estate for a moment here. I mean, what is the biggest opportunity, particularly when people are looking around some of the parts of the industry and still seeing some pain, either pain on the office side, or maybe you could argue over exuberance on the AI data center side in some ways. How do you feel about the opportunities
look,
out there?
Real estate is always talked about as a hyper-local market. We would agree, and it matters not just what market you're in, but what street and what street corner you're on. And so I think in order to be great at real estate, you have to be broad in your footprint and broad in your capability. You're right, there's distressed opportunity or transitional opportunities in office. There's growing opportunities in data centers. We're making significant investments in industrial real estate to take advantage of what we perceive to be a realignment of global supply chains. So there's a lot of different ways to play real estate. I will say, though, the things that drive value in real estate going forward are going to be rates. Again, whether they come down fast or not, stability in rates is a positive for real estate growth. Economic growth, and we're continuing to see strength in the U.S. economy, that will, drive transaction volumes, and then supply. And I think one of the things that people don't fully appreciate is because of the headwinds that the real estate market has had over the last couple of years, the market is fundamentally undersupplied, which does two things. It supports the value of the existing assets that people own, and it's going to create demand for new development and new capital coming into the market. So you got to pick your spots, but I think generally when you view it through the lens of rates and supply, there's a tailwind going into 2025.
I believe rates are staying higher for longer. Then you also said a potential distressed opportunity in real estate. How big is that distressed opportunity, and would you play in it? Would you want to invest in it?
Yeah, we cover the waterfront in terms of our real estate positioning. Multifamily and industrial have been our two largest exposures, but we also play to an increasing extent in data centers, student housing, self-storage, so other growth markets. We've largely avoided office in the primary market. We have large pools of capital that are geared to invest in opportunistic real estate equity and opportunistic real estate debt. So what we've learned in past cycles is the way that distress plays out is sometimes it's a secondary market opportunity where you're buying good assets at good basis. Sometimes it's just a shift in the competitive dynamic in the primary market. So you have to be prepared for both, right? If banks who are overexposed to commercial real estate office don't sell those assets, that probably means they're going to be less competitive in the primary market. So you have to be prepared for either outcome.
I'm at a grocery store in Germany, and we're gonna buy every single thing in the store.
We're doing all of this to promote the launch of Feastables in Germany.
And to celebrate, I brought the biggest German creators to buy everything in this store. Let's go do it. No joke, we are actually buying everything in this store. Yeah, I guess we just start grabbing things.
Can I take this? I guess so.
Can I buy everything?
Grab anything you see.
Okay.
Just remember, it's all going to charity.
And we only have the store for 24 hours.
Let's go!
Come on, faster. We gotta go faster.
All right, now it's time for the first scan.
How long is your shift today?
Normally just 8 hours.
I might need you all day.
All day.
Well, yeah, we're buying everything.
All right.
And don't worry, we paid the employees for their longer hours.
I'm glad I invited all these German creators, or this literally would have taken me all day.
Be careful, it's for charity, man.
This is your gum?
Yeah, this is my gum.
Some of the creators were having a really good time with the empty store.
This is how we eat it in America.
Oh my God!
Sorry.
Auf die Plätze. Fertig. Go.
Oh my.
And the rest of them are helping to clear off the shelves.
Attention shoppers, we have now spent over $30,000.
Which isn't enough, hurry up!
Nice, nice, doing a good job.
Thank you.
And we're reaching a little bit of a bottleneck.
Look at these carts the creators grabbed earlier.
They're eventually pulled into the back where everyone sorts through all the stuff and puts them in boxes to go to charity. Van number 1 full. Let's drop it off.
Our first charitable stop was HNU Berlin Nature Preserve, where they rescue animals and protect wildlife. And we're gonna feed some animals.
Bro, they're loving it.
Jimmy,
Yeah?
Ronaldo is there.
Are those goats?
Yeah.
And while we were feeding animals, Carl had a plan of his own.
Bring them in! We're gonna finish before Jimmy gets back. Once you swap out the creators with the actual workers, all of a sudden everything's much quicker. So
This was way faster than I thought.
honestly, we should have just gotten Jimmy to leave earlier.
All right, the next van's loaded up. Off to the next charity.
The next batch we sorted will be donated to Berliner Tiertafel to help families and individuals care for their pets. Back at the store, let's see what Carl's up to.
What happened while it's gone?
This happened.
There's still 35 aisles
Don't
left.
look that way. But we found these, okay? You
Okay.
can scan things and it automatically goes to the registry so you don't have to go anymore.
All right, you know what, Carl? You're actually kind of smart. We're cheating the system.
It's like at the grocery store, you try to figure out which lane has the least people. Oh, here we go. Perfect.
We've cleared out these 2 shelves. They're working on these shelves. These are cleared. We're actually starting to make some meaningful progress. If I cut to the cameras around the store, we literally have an army of people helping us buy this store. There's like 10 people at the cashiers. There's 15 people in the back sorting through stuff. There's like 15 people grabbing things off the shelf. And we have like 10 people organizing things in trucks. Fingers crossed, hopefully we can buy everything by the end of the day. All right, I'm covering them all up.
Oh!
That way at the end, it'll be a surprise how much money we spent.
Oh, that's cool.
Across the 4 cash registers, we're around $200,000 deep, and we still have over half the store to go. The number at the end of this video is not gonna be fun.
Since sorting and scanning takes too long, the crew grabbed a go-kart to speed things up.
Let's go!
As we continue to make progress,
I wanna find some people to give free groceries. Do you guys wanna be in one of our videos? Yeah, grab the most expensive stuff you can find. Edico not only sells Feastables, but it also sells our brand new toys, Mr. Beast Labs. As you can see, the first thing they went for in the store. That's a good sign.
Everything is scanned now. It costs around about 2,000 euros. Now we're getting everything out here.
Thank you very much.
Let's go.
The cooler trucks are ready, so we have to get going, guys.
Obviously, buying everything in the store and donating to charity was incredibly expensive. So if you could do me a favor, go to your Edico, try Feastables. It is the best tasting chocolate on the planet. I'm totally not biased, and I think you guys will love it.
I think right now we're making really good progress.
It seemed impossible when we started, but these aisles are empty. We only have 3 aisles left, and then the entire store is sold out.
as word spread about what we were doing, another creator showed up.
Bro, it looks perfect, man.
You just need to finish.
I never seen supermarket like empty like this, bro.
All right, everybody, can I have you up here, all the creators? I just walked down all the aisles, and they look empty, except this one. We are on the final aisle.
Yeah!
You'll be able to say, we bought everything in an Edica.
Okay, the first one is ready.
Look at the efficiency difference.
All right, now we gotta unpack it. This is the challenge.
Let's go!
Guys, if you drop this, that's kind of mean to the charity.
No. We will drop nothing.
Even things like this frozen section look small, but there's like 10 deep of each of these, so it takes forever.
I'm tired.
We saved the best for last, Feastables. I just want to say thank you to all you guys. You stayed and helped. You could have left 10 hours ago, but you did it. I'll throw their channels on the screen. Just huge shout out to them. And now that we said that, let's grab all the Feastables. In case you forgot, Feastables available in every single Edica. We came all the way to Germany to show you just how much we care. Go try them in your local Edica. I hope you love it. Can't wait to see how much I spent and how long the receipt is. Like, we might break a world record. Every shelf in the store is empty. Now we just need to scan them. As you guys know, we've been scanning on 4 cash registers. The first one, let's see the damage, 130,895 euros.
Okay.
That's not too bad for one.
Okay.
This one is also 130,456 euros.
What?
This one is $128,000. And for the final cash register, 135,000 with a total of $524,000. I meant to say euro. Sorry, my American kicked in. Hey, everybody, here's the receipt. All right, who wants to grab the end?
Yes.
Candidate. For many decades, the Post very studiously did not endorse presidential candidates. The kind of founder of the modern Post, a guy named Eugene Meyer, whose words are still inscribed on in the lobby as you walk in, was against the idea because he thought an independent newspaper shouldn't be endorsing presidential candidates, and so they didn't do it. After Watergate, the Post started endorsing presidential candidates. And so we're talking about this in that time frame. It hadn't come up before. And, we just decided that, it wasn't going to help well, first of all, it wasn't going to influence the election either way. We didn't believe, there's no evidence that newspaper endorsements influence elections. No independent voter in Pennsylvania at that time was going to say, oh, is that what the Washington Post thinks? Well, then I'll do that. So that wasn't going to happen. And at the same time, we're struggling with the issue that all traditional media is struggling with, which is a very difficult and significant loss of trust. And, the trust surveys have been done for many decades now, and the media has been going down in those surveys for decades. They've always been able to hang on to the one, small positive, that they're always above Congress. And this year they lost even that, falling below Congress, which is not easy to achieve. Congress was thrilled, by the way, not to be at the very bottom of the list. And so we just decided that the pluses of doing this were very small, and it added to the perception of bias. The newspapers and media in general, if they are going to try and be objective and independent, they have to pass the same requirement that a voting machine does. They have to count the votes accurately, and people have to believe that they count the votes accurately. Both requirements are just as important for a voting machine. And media is similar. And there's a strong perception. Not all of it is the media's fault. There's a lot of external factors involved too. But where we can do something, we should.
Okay, but let me ask you, and you know that there was blowback. I just want to read you. This is Marty Barron, who was your former editor of that paper. He said, "This is cowardice with democracy as its casualty." David Remnick said, "If Jeff Bezos had said 2 years ago that he thought the editorial page should get rid of endorsements, all of them, you could argue the case one way or another." But he was effectively suggesting that given this scenario with the timing of it...
Look at, if I had the prescience to think about this topic at all 2 years before, that would have been better for perception reasons. But in fact, we made this decision. It was the right decision. I'm proud of the decision we made. And it was far from cowardly, because we knew there would be blowback, and we did the right thing anyway.
Okay, so let me ask you about that, though. There was blowback. I think 250,000 people canceled their subscription. So did you think when you were doing this that some people were going to say that actually it creates less trust in media? I mean, part of it was aimed at creating more trust in media. And at the same time, clearly there were other people saying maybe there's less trust.
No, I don't follow that logic.
You don't? Mm-mm. And so were you surprised at the...
Not really. We knew that this was going to be perceived in a very big way. As I said, these things punch above their weight.
And were you worried about that at all? I mean,
you can't worry. You can't do the wrong thing because you're worried about bad PR or whatever it is you want to call it. So this was the right decision. We made the right decision. I'm very proud of the decision.
So let me just ask you one related question, which is this. You said in your opinion piece about all of this, I thought it was fascinating. You said, when it comes to the appearance of conflict, I am not the ideal owner.
No, I'm a terrible owner
of the Post.
For the Post, from the point of view of appearance of conflict. There is, probably not a single day goes by where some Amazon executive or some Blue Origin executive or some Bezos Earth Fund leader isn't meeting with a government official somewhere. And so there are always going to be appearances of conflict.
And is that...
I would be a pure newspaper owner who only owned a newspaper and did nothing else would probably be, from that point of view, a much better owner. Now, the advantage I bring to the Post is, when they need financial resources, I'm available. I'm kind of, I'm like that. I'm the doting parent in that regard.
I think embedded underneath the fundamental question is this, and the Wall Street Journal wrote about it, the New York Times has been writing about it. It's whether, and this was, I think, the question that people had, which was whether you had any worry in your mind about your other businesses, about Trump, and whether he would ultimately target an Amazon or target a Blue Origin as retaliation against negative coverage, given that you had lived through that.
No, I don't think so. That was certainly not in my mind. And I'm also very aware that the Post covers all presidents very aggressively, is going to continue to cover all presidents very aggressively. And, this endorsement or non-endorsement isn't going to...
You did not think that was going to change?
It's a drop in the bucket.
Anything. So
no, it won't change anything.
If he likes you, he likes you. And if he doesn't like you, he's not going to like you anyway.
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's a different question. But if we're talking about Trump, I think it's very interesting. I'm actually very optimistic this time around that we're going to see. I'm very hopeful about this. He seems to have a lot of energy around reducing regulation. And my point of view, if I can help him do that, I'm going to help him, because we do have too much regulation in this country. This country is so set up to grow. By the way, all of our problems, all of our economic problems, like if you look at the deficit and the debt, the national debt, and how gigantic it is as a portion of GDP, these are real problems and they're real long-term problems. And the way you get out of them is by outgrowing them. You're going to solve the problem of the national debt by making it a smaller percentage of GDP, not by shrinking the national debt, but by growing the GDP. You have to grow the denominator. And that means you have to grow GDP at, 3, 4, 5% a year, and, let the national debt grow slower than that. If you can do that, this is a very manageable problem. So we need a growth orientation in this country. This is the most important thing, a growth mindset. And we are the luckiest country in the world. We have all these natural resources, including energy independence. We have the best risk capital system in the world by far. So, people get confused about why does the United States have so much venture success, so much entrepreneurial success? Why are the big tech companies here and not somewhere else? What's really going on with all this dynamism in this country compared to what we see around elsewhere in the world? Right. And there are a bunch of reasons for that, but the biggest one, 8 of 10 points there, is that we have better risk capital. So it's not the banking system. We have a good banking system, but so does Europe. Right. What's different here is that you can raise, $50 million of seed capital to do something that only has a 10% chance of working. That's crazy. But the people who are giving you that seed capital know that their expected value is still positive in many cases, or they're at least gambling that that's true. That risk capital system that we have in this country is turning out to be very hard for other countries to duplicate. So we have that. We have, we speak English, and English is turning into the lingua franca of the whole world. It's there's so many advantages here, but we are burdened by excessive permitting and regulation. You can't build a bridge and all these things. You know what they are. We see these examples all the time. We need to be able to build solar fields and everything else.
But so you're optimistic.
I'm super optimistic
about this president. And the reason I ask is because
I'm very optimistic that President Trump is serious about this regulatory agenda, and I think he has a good chance of succeeding.
What about the idea that he thinks that the press is the enemy?
Well, I think I'm going to try to talk him out of that idea. I don't think the press is the enemy. And I don't think, he's also, you've probably grown in the last 8 years. He has too. This is not the case. The press is not the enemy.
I hope you're right.
I hope I'm right too.
Have you talked?
Let's go persuade him of this. No, let's
have you talked to him about it?
But you and I should go. Let's go talk to him.
If we could try.
I really don't. I think that this is absolutely. I don't think he's going to see it the same way. But maybe I'll be wrong.
Was that always your thought, by the way?
What I've seen so far is that he is calmer than he was the first time and more confident, more settled.
Let me ask one related question, then I want to actually get into space, but it actually is an interesting segue to space, because we were talking earlier this morning to Sam Altman about Elon Musk. And Elon Musk's relationship with the president, interestingly. And there's been a lot of questions about whether there could be the possibility that Elon, given his proximity, would make things difficult for people who are his competitors. Elon, in the space context, is your biggest competitor.
Yes.
Does this concern you?
Well, they're certainly very able competitors. I mean, this is an arena where I have the...
Oh, no. I know he's a great competitor. No, I'm saying, does it concern you, his proximity?
No, I was headed there.
Oh.
But I'm just saying they're certainly very good competitors, and no doubt about that. I take at face value what has been said, which is that he is not going to use his political power to advantage his own companies or to disadvantage his competitors. I take that at face value. I could be wrong about that, but I think it could be true. I think he probably is trying to, I think this Department of Government Efficiency and that he and Vivek are helping Trump with and so on. Again, I'd like to take, I've had a lot of success in life not being cynical. And I've very rarely been taken advantage of as a result. It's happened a couple of times, but not very often. And I think that cynicism, why be cynical about that? Let's go into it hoping that the statements that have been made are correct, that this is going to be done, above board in the public interest. And if that turns out to be naive, well, then we'll see. But I actually think it's going to be great. I'm hoping.
I'm glad you could address it. It's something I think we all want to know. One, by the way, before I even get to space, Washington Post question, just because there's a lot of media people here. The big plan to save or fix the Washington Post, as you've been a great innovator as it comes to Amazon and everything else, do you have a big idea about how the Post is going to change? Newspapers are going to change?
I have a bunch of ideas, and I'm working on that right now. And I have a couple of small inventions there. So we'll see. We saved the Washington Post once. This will be the second time. I'd like to. It was saved for, 2013, so 11 years ago. It took a couple of years. It made money for 6 or 7 years after that. In the last few years, it's lost money again. And it needs to be put back on a good footing again. And the first time we did it by transitioning away from advertising to subscriptions and also away from being a local paper to being a national paper. And there are many more details to it, but that was the basic formula that was used, and it was very successful. And we have a few other ideas, so stay tuned. We'll see.
Okay. Here's my question to you about space, which is I think a lot of us watched you. This was just weeks after you stepped down as the CEO of Amazon. You went aboard New Shepard as its first crew flight. And I remember watching it on TV just like everybody else. This is 2001. And I know this is something you wanted to do literally since you were a kid. I mean, I went back and looked. There were articles and letters and people who said that when you were a child you were talking about this. And so I was just curious if you could just take us back to that morning and what that felt like, because you have now put all of your eggs now in the space basket, and what that was like and how that might have even shifted your thinking about
What do you
this.
mean, put all of my eggs in the space basket?
Well,
you mean...
You have a huge investment in space.
Yes, but it's not all my eggs.
Not all of them.
Yeah, no, I still have a huge investment in Amazon, and I still spend a lot of time there too. I've actually never worked harder. This retirement thing I've turned out to be extremely lame at, and so I'm waking up every morning and doing meetings from 9 to 7 and reading documents, and most of it is Blue Origin, but quite a bit of it is still Amazon too. That morning we're going to space, and I'll tell you about the overview effect, which everyone goes. We've now sent 6%. New Shepard is our tourism vehicle. It takes people up in space. The whole journey takes 11 minutes. You're in space for 4 minutes. You go up above the Kármán line, 100 kilometers up. You see the curvature of the Earth, the thin limb of the Earth's atmosphere. It truly is a life-changing, transformative thing. Every astronaut, everybody who's ever been to space has felt this. And it has a name. It's called the overview effect. Jim Lovell, the Apollo 13 astronaut and later moonwalker, has a beautiful quote. When he saw the Earth from space, he looked back and said, "I realize you don't go to heaven when you die, you go to heaven when you're born." And that's how beautiful this planet is. And you may have seen William Shatner when he flew on New Shepard and he came back, he saw everything, the blackness and how there's the nothingness, and he described it as death and said, look, this is the one little pool of life that in this entire solar system. It's truly incredible. And it is a profound experience that's hard to describe. But that morning, something else happened to me that was very personal. We're getting ready to go at 4:45 in the morning, and my whole family is there, some close friends, extended families, 35, 40 people there. And by the way, I'm going on the first human flight of this vehicle. And so it's never flown people before. And my poor mother, what's worse is I'm bringing my brother with me. So it's me and my brother. And we wake up getting ready to go to the launch site. And kind of, we weren't really expecting it, but everybody, of course, is awake and there to say goodbye. But they thought they were saying goodbye forever. And which was surprising to me. I wasn't expecting this, but they were genuinely terrified for us. But it was paradoxically for my brother and me, it felt really good to us because we got to see how loved we were. And it was very interesting, my kids and my sister and my mom and my dad and these close friends, it's easy to know what's going on inside your own head. It's easy to know that you love people. It's not to know how much you're loved by others is not always as obvious. And to see that concern was very meaningful, very emotional. That was a kind of an unexpected, the overview effect. I talked to astronauts. I knew I was in store for something special, but it was very interesting to have that feeling from my family too.
Did that change the way you thought about everything you're doing with Blue Origin in terms of what this is all about? You've said that the reason we've got to go to space, in my view, is to save Earth. Is that come from being up there and looking at that?
Yeah.
Or was that something you were thinking about?
For whatever reason, since I'm a teenager, and in fact, there's a high school newspaper article, my Miami Palmetto Senior High, they wrote an article about my space plans, which I would tell everyone who would stand still long enough about. And those plans included what I am still working on, which is moving all polluting industry off Earth. And so my view, but I know that sounds fantastical. So I beg the indulgence of this audience to bear with me for a moment, but it's not fantastical. This is going to happen. And we need to lower the cost of access to space low enough, and that's what New Glenn, our orbital vehicle, is all about. That's the big super heavy launch vehicle it's literally on the pad now waiting for regulatory approval. It needs its final regulatory approvals to launch. So we're very, very close. And if we can lower the costs enough, and we will, I mean, it may take, who knows how many years it will take, but we can set up the preconditions where the next generation or the generation after that will be able to move polluting industry off Earth. And then this planet will be maintained as it should be, and can kind of be, you can sort of think of it as zoned residential and light industry. And if you want to use large amounts of energy and large amounts of pollutants and so on, you go do that off Earth. And so we get the best of both. We get to have this energy-intensive civilization and use ever more energy per capita and get all the benefits that we get from that, which are many, by the way. You don't want to go back in time. And it's really important to think about, when people talk about the good old days, that is such an illusion. That almost everything is better today than it was. Infant mortality is better. Global illiteracy is better. Global poverty is far better. Things really are better today. There's one exception to that.
Which is?
The natural world. The natural world, if you go back in time 500 years, we had pristine oceans, pristine rivers, pristine forests. And that is, that's part of the trade we've made, is we're kind of, we're using up the natural world here. But space has infinite, for all practical purposes, infinite energy, infinite raw materials.
So it's a very interesting philosophical choice, because one of the things you're talking about trying to save the Earth, and I was going to say that a number of other people, including I think Musk and others, say that we need an escape hatch from Earth, right? We need to all move to Mars because Earth is not going to be saved. Do you see that?
No, we have to save. So first of all, there is no plan B. We have to save Earth. So we've sent robotic probes to all of the planets in this solar system. This is the good one. And we must save it. We cannot, look, we can live, we can choose how we want to live. It is not impossible, if you think about climate change and so on, some of the issues that we face here because of the way we're doing things currently. You could imagine a world with enough technological sophistication where we can turn Earth into sort of a giant spaceship, like air-conditioned.
It's fantastical. No, I know.
But I'm saying air-conditioned planet and, kind of pave the whole thing and turn it. That's a bad future. We don't need to do that. Turning Earth into, take the whole thing and turning it into a human construct and destroying this natural ecosystem when it's so unique and such a gem, that's not the right way to do it. So we should move all that off Earth. And we will, because we won't do it the wrong way. And you know why we won't? Because humans value beauty and art. I have a ranch in West Texas. It's actually also where the launch site for the suborbital vehicle is. And on that ranch, you can, in many different places, you can go and find, arrowheads and ancient pottery. And some of the pottery is 7,000 years old. And it is, and that was a hard scrabble, subsistence level life. And that pottery is decorated. So here are these people who are in a desert environment, scraping for water, food, and yet they're taking the time to paint their pottery. What does that tell you about our values? And what humans value beauty and art. We're not going to destroy this planet.
Let me ask you two other related space questions. I had the opportunity to go tour Blue Origin in the fall. And one of the things that everybody down there talks about is this idea of getting the moon and then using the moon. In fact, the phrase that one of your colleagues said was, we're going to use the moon. The moon is going to be like JFK, the airport. Because, like JFK, the airport. Because we're going to send stuff to the moon, and then from the moon, then we're going to go to Mars. It's like a pit stop along the way. And I thought that was sort of a very interesting thought process.
There's a very strong argument to be made that the moon is a good stepping stone to the rest of the solar system. And the reason for that, because the moon has a much lower gravity level than the Earth, and because it has a lot of very important minerals, and also water in the form of ice in the permanently shadowed craters at the poles of the moon. And ice can be converted, water can be converted into hydrogen and oxygen, which happen to be the very best, highest performing rocket propellants. And so you can, it takes, to raise a kilogram of mass from the Earth takes 28 times as much energy as raising that same kilogram from the moon. So to the degree that you can get raw materials from the moon, which again, we're talking about a couple of generations in the future, but to the degree that you can get raw materials from the moon instead of from Earth, those materials will allow you to build spaceships and to fuel those spaceships and to build solar arrays and all these other things that you want to do, but using lunar resources instead of Earth resources. And then it would provide a very convenient stepping stone to the rest of the solar system.
Dave Limp, who you just hired to run Blue Origin for you as a CEO, said apparently when he was interviewing with you, he said, Jeff, is Blue Origin a hobby or a business?
Yeah.
What did you tell him?
It's a business. It's not a very good business yet.
How big a business can it be?
We're investing. No, look, I think it's going to be, from a business point of view, from a financial returns point of view, I think it's going to be the best business that I've ever been involved in. But it's going to take a while.
So bigger than Amazon?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a different question, which is, I remember just being down there, the scale of everything. I wish you could all just go and see it. Is so remarkable. You sort of look at the scale, and you can't even understand what is happening around you. It's sort of so hard to fathom just the size of it all. And it made me think about confidence. We were actually talking to Serena Williams earlier today about confidence. And I was thinking to myself,
it's easy for her. She just has to be the best in the world.
Well, but this is going to go to you too, which is, when you started Amazon, that was a business that had to scale, and you had to see the scale to work. I remember for years, I was covering it. I would be writing about when you were losing money left, right, and center. Everyone thought this whole thing was crazy. And
we lost money for 11 years.
The scale of it people I thought it was insane.
Yes.
And if you go down to Florida, to Cape Canaveral, and you see the scale of this thing, you say, my God, this is insane.
Tom Brokaw interviewed me one time about Amazon's losses, and he looked at me and he said, Mr. Bezos, can you even spell profit? And I said, yes, P-R-O-P-H-E-T.
So where do you think your confidence, though, comes from to create a business that requires such scale? Most people like to, they take one foot and they put the other foot, and they want to be able to see where they're going. And I would argue, in the case of Amazon, in the case of space, you can't see maybe you can see where you're going, but a lot of people actually struggle to see it.
Well, I think this is, first of all, a very good question, very interesting question, and I'm not sure I know the right answer, or maybe there are many answers. So let's start with that. But one observation I would have is that I think it's generally human nature to overestimate risk and underestimate opportunity. And so I think entrepreneurs in general, would be well advised to try and bias against that piece of human nature. The risks are probably not as big as you perceive, and the opportunities may be bigger than you perceive. And so when you say it's confidence, but maybe it's just trying to compensate for that accepting that that's a human bias and trying to compensate against it. The second thing I would point out is that, thinking small is a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Now, when do you think you learned this, though? Because you were doing this at a very young age. I mean, this is something that maybe a wizened old man would say. But I only say it because I remember it's very early. I remember watching on 60 Minutes. This is maybe 1999. And at the end of the interview, they were asking you about whether this whole thing could work or not. And you said it's not a fear that it can't work. It's a fact that it might not work.
Right. That is true.
And no, but I remember seeing that, thinking, and you just said it in this sort of matter-of-fact kind of way, which is to say, did you say to yourself, there's a massive risk this is not really going to happen?
To raise the first $1 million of seed capital for Amazon. So I sold 20% of the company at a $5 million valuation. I sold 20% of the company for $1 million to 22 angel investors, roughly $50,000 each. And I had to take 60 meetings. So whatever, roughly 40 of them said no, and a little 22 or so said yes. And it was the hardest thing I've ever done. Basically, this was 1995-ish, 1995. And the first question was, what's the internet? Everybody wanted to know what the internet was. And by the way, the 40 no's were hard-earned no's. Like, they weren't just no. They were me, multiple meetings, working really hard, trying to get people to write that $50,000 check. And the whole enterprise could have been extinguished then. And what I do remember in those meetings, I would always tell people I thought there was a 70% chance they would lose their investment. And in retrospect, I think that might have been a little naive. But I think it was true. In fact, if anything, I think I was giving myself better than
the odds.
Better than the real odds.
What do you think the real odds are in space with Blue Origin?
Well, Blue Origin is, doesn't have the same level of financing risk. So, because I can finance Blue Origin with my Amazon stock. So I think Blue Origin has a lot of runway. Blue Origin is going to do some very amazing things here, and it's and by the way, Amazon is doing amazing things. I saw some of our announcements yesterday, I hope, but the Nova foundational models are truly incredible. There's a bunch of stuff going on. The world is so interesting right now. We're in multiple golden ages at once. And, I'm also very interested in robotics. I'm not doing that directly, but I'm doing it. I'm investing in a number of robotics companies. I'm a big believer in it. I think there's never been a more extraordinary moment to be alive. We're so lucky.
I want to go back to Amazon for a second. Well, actually, I want to go back. You just mentioned the fundraising for Amazon at the outset.
Yes.
One of the things that I noticed recently, and you'll infer why I'm even asking you this, is throughout your whole career at Amazon, it appears to me like you paid yourself about $80,000 a year in total.
Yeah.
Cash comp. And never took additional equity in the company the entire time.
No, I never did. And I asked the comp committee of the board not to give me any comp. And my view was, I was a founder. I already owned a significant amount of the company. And I just didn't feel good about taking more. I felt I had plenty of incentive. It was, I owned, more than 10% of the company, more earlier, before it was diluted by various things, more than 20% of the company. And I just felt, how could I possibly need more incentive than owning such a, most founders own big chunks of the company. They don't really need, they're more like owner operators. The way they increase their wealth is not by getting more equity. They just want to make the equity they have more valuable. And so I just would have felt icky about it. And I'm actually very proud of that decision. I sometimes wish that there were and maybe you can do this, Andrew, or maybe the Washington Post will do this, but somebody needs to make a list where they rank people by how much wealth they've created for other people. And so instead of the Forbes list, it ranks you by your own wealth. So, Amazon's market cap is $2.3 trillion today. I own about, 200 billion-ish of it. So if you take 2.3 billion and subtract out the piece I kept for myself, then I've created something like 2.1 trillion of wealth for other people. That should put me pretty high on some kind of list. And and that's a better list. You know, how much wealth have you created for other people?
Right.
You know, people like Jensen at NVIDIA, he's going to be very high on that list. And that would be a pretty cool list. Somebody should do that list.
I think that is a very cool list. How does the idea of your own influence sit with you? Do you think about that? Do you appreciate that you are one of the most powerful people in the world, frankly, given your connections to Amazon, given what you're doing with Blue Origin, given all the other things that you're investing in and can do, the Washington Post?
You know, I don't. It's a fair question, but I don't think about it that way. I don't wake up and think, you know, how am I going to exercise my power today? You know, I wake up and follow my curiosity. I've always been a wanderer, and I even organize our Amazon meetings this way. I want crisp documents and messy meetings, and I want the meetings to wander. The only meeting I'm ever on time to is my first one, because I won't finish a meeting until I'm really finished.
You can do that because you're the boss. What about everybody else?
They have to wait for me. But but that, you know, this is you know, I try to teach, like, really wander in the meetings. There's certain kinds of meetings that are like a weekly business review or something, where it's like a set pattern and you're going through it. That can have an agenda and it can be very crisp. That's a different kind of meeting. But most of the meetings that are useful, we do these 6-page memos, we do a half-hour study hall, we read them, and then we have a messy discussion. So I like the memo should be like angels singing up from high. It's so clear and beautiful. And then the meeting can be messy.
How messy can it be?
And I completely...
No, I asked that because culturally, right now, and there's so many people in the room here who go to meetings, and we don't know how messy they can be. No, I mean that, because you don't know whether you really can raise your hand and say, this idea is completely insane and should not be happening.
In fact, I am very skeptical if the meeting's not messy. At one time, it doesn't happen very often because it's kind of verboten at Amazon, but I could tell in the meeting that the team had rehearsed the meeting.
That happens.
A
lot.
I could just feel it. Like you can tell the little tiny cues. And I turned to them and said, "Did you guys rehearse this meeting?" And they're like, "Yes." I was like, "Don't do that again. You don't need to." Because here's what, maybe you would rehearse a sales meeting, right? If you're going, you know, if you're going to go visit a customer and you're trying to sell them a new product or something, maybe you want to have all your ducks in a row and you want to put your best foot forward.
But that's what people do for the CEO.
Internally, you're seeking truth, not a pitch. I don't want to be pitched, and you don't want any of your senior executives to be pitched. And that's why messy is good. And you also want to be early. It's like you don't want the whole thing to be figured out and then presented to you.
Right.
Like, you want to be part of the sausage making. Like, show me the ugly bits. Like, and I always ask, you know, are there any dissenting opinions on the team? You know, I want to try to get to the controversy. Like, let's make this meeting messy. Help me make it messy.
How hard was it for you to leave Amazon?
I go last, too.
Oh, yes, I've heard about this.
We try to go in kind of seniority order, so the most junior person goes first, and the most senior person goes last. And it helps with groupthink.
Because if you say what's going to happen, what happens if you have already come up with your view, though?
Well, I don't want to torture people. So in that rare case where I actually know that nothing can change my mind, I will just say, look, guys, nothing here is going to change my mind. So, like, let's not waste a lot of time. I don't want to, it shouldn't be a charade. That's a very rare case. I'm actually personally very easy to influence. Something I've realized later in my life, or just maybe starting 10 years ago or so, I realized I'm a very easy person to influence. I change my mind a lot. You know, people talk to me and I take in the information and I change. I can be easily, but a couple of % of the time, no force in the world can move me because I'm so sure of something. There were things, you know, I can't tell you how many people tried to talk me out of fulfillment by Amazon, as an example. And I just knew, and I was like, you guys, you will never talk me out of this.
Do you think
we're going to do this? I will do this through sheer force of will if need be.
Do you think that that this is actually something that I think a lot of people contend with? Do you think you have to project confidence?
No, I don't. I've gotten, well, I guess it's a little bit of a personal story in a way, but I have gotten more intimate, I would say, in the last, as I've gotten older. So maybe the last 10 or 15 years. And my upbringing, I have really supportive family, and but in our family there were some unspoken rules, which I think probably most families have unspoken rules of one kind or another. And in mine, all the positive emotions were allowed: optimism, happiness, joy, but the only negative emotion that was kind of tolerated in that unspoken family dynamic, and only occasionally, was anger. Sadness, fear, anxiety, these things were looked down on. And that's probably, in a scheme of things, probably pretty helpful for founding a company. It's like you probably mostly want to be focused on positive things anyway. And you need optimism. Without optimism and energy, I don't know how some glum Eeyore type founder could ever lead a company to success. I mean, you got to have some optimism, you got to have some energy. It's got to be a little contagious. There's going to be a lot of bad days. You got to lift people up. So you need that. But what I have figured out over the last, especially I started with my own family and my close relationships, my children and my brother and sister and parents and so on, is I realized I'm not really being intimate with them if I'm not sharing when I'm sad or sharing when I'm scared or these kinds of things. And so I started working on that with them and found it very meaningful. It deepened those relationships very significantly. And then I realized those were valid emotions at work too. And so it turns out they're more precise. All of your emotions are sort of an early warning system. If you're stressed, for me, that's a kind of an early, a radar that is detecting that there's something I'm not taking action on. It's an important indicator. And it turns out if you're channeling all of your negative emotions into frustration or anger or something like that, you're not being very precise. It's much better now. I've had, I'll have a meeting and I listen for a while, and when it's my turn to talk, I'll say, "I'm scared," and that's more effective. People are like, "What are you scared of?" And then you can start talking about, okay, what's making you scared? That's, you get more in touch. It actually help you, probably not just your family relationships, your close, intimate relationships, but I think it helps you at work too.
Let me ask you an Amazon question. Amazon is your baby. And,
for sure.
You stepped away from that.
Yeah.
What did that feel like? How hard was that for you? And what is it like now?
Well, even when Amazon was a tiny company, for whatever reason, I always had in my mind that I wanted to build a company that would outlast me. And so I've always been thinking about it in that framework, and how it could kind of grow up into a young adult and be set off into the world successfully and independently. And that's very different. You can build companies in different ways. You don't have to do that. You can be the genius with 1,000 helpers. You can and that's also can be very successful. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just, it wasn't what I wanted to do. And I, I felt like a parent sending, or maybe like with your kids go off to college, or maybe when they graduate from college, and you're hoping that you've created this independent child, now adult, young adult, who can go off in the world. You don't want them to be dependent on you. If they are, you've failed. And I've always preached inside the company and to myself that no one is indispensable. I think it's most important for CEOs to look at themselves in the mirror every day and say, I'm not indispensable. And so I want Amazon to go off without me. And I'm still at Amazon, by the way. I haven't left fully, and I am a parent, and I will. But I'm a 60-year-old man, and my mom and dad still worry about me, right? So you never stop being a parent. My heart is in Amazon. My curiosity is in Amazon. My fears are there. My love is there. I'm never going to forget about Amazon. I'll always be there to help. And right now I'm putting a lot of time in it because it's also I can help, and it's super interesting. So why not? But this is the right way, in my view, to think about it. Big leaders only have to do a few things. Big leaders have to identify the big ideas. They have to enforce tough execution against those big ideas. And they need to grow the next generation of leaders.
Okay, so
that's really it.
So two things.
And so my job, one of my jobs right now is to make sure Andy Jassy and the whole leadership team are successful. I take that job very seriously.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. As a parent,
yeah,
your kids can go off, but sometimes they do things you don't want the kids to do.
Absolutely. I've got kids in college age and just out of college, and I still have to Venmo them money every once in a while. It just happened.
We'll talk about what you subscribe and save to in just a moment on your app. But help us with this. You just said you're very involved with it right now. What is it that you're doing at Amazon?
AI. Yeah. So there are a few things, but small things. But it's 95% AI.
And where do you think?
It's just so because we are literally working on 1,000 applications internally. So AI, you have to remember, modern AI is a horizontal enabling layer. It can be used to improve everything. It will be in everything. This is most like electricity. I went to a brewery in Luxembourg many years ago now. In fact, this trip was one of the little tiny catalysts for the founding of AWS. And the brewery was 300 years old. This company making beer for 300 years. A lot of the oldest companies in the world are breweries, by the way. I don't know why this is. And they were very proud of their history, and they had a museum. And in that museum was an electric power generator, 100 years old. And because when they wanted to improve the efficiency of their brewery with electricity, there was no power grid. So they had to build their own power station. So they made their own electricity. And at that time, that's what everybody did. If a hotel wanted electricity, they had their own electric generator. And I looked at this and I thought, this is what computation is like today. Everybody has their own data center. And that's not going to last. It makes no sense. You're going to buy compute off the grid. That's AWS. We were doing it internally at Amazon for ourselves, and the APIs were created. That's a very interesting story in its own right. But this is, these kind of horizontal layers like electricity and compute and now artificial intelligence, they go everywhere. I guarantee you there is not a single application that you can think of that is not going to be made better by AI.
And where do you think Amazon is in this? We've been talking about large language models all day. We talked to Sam, we talked to Sundar. Clearly, AWS has a big opportunity, but on the language model piece, it doesn't have its own. Does it matter?
You've been so busy, Andrew, that you did not see
I did yesterday.
our announcements yesterday.
I did see the announcement.
About Nova.
Yes.
Well, that is a large language model, and it is our own.
And do you believe that that model is competitive with these other models?
It is absolutely competitive. So it is, it benchmarks extraordinarily well. It's a world-class foundation model. It's a frontier model. And it's very, very price performant.
Do you think that all these things we were talking about it earlier become commoditized, though, the models themselves?
I don't think they'll be exactly commoditized, but I think I think models will end up being specialists at certain things. They'll be better at slightly different. Some will have lower latency. Some will be, better at calling APIs. There will turn out to be a bunch of flavors. Just like you might not consult, if you're phoning a friend and consulting somebody, you're not always going to consult the same person for everything. It won't be exactly like that because this kind of intelligence that we're creating is a little alien. It's very different from human intelligence in certain ways. These transformers, these large generative AI, so there. I think even a single application is likely to call multiple AI models, depending on what, some of them will be lower cost because they have a small number of parameters, and then every once in a while you'll have to call the really big model. The big models are mostly going to be used, I don't know, probably mostly, but they'll certainly be often used as teacher models. So, this is what we announced yesterday with Nova. There are 4 classes of model. There's the giant, frontier model, but that model, we distill down to the smaller models that are more cost effective, have lower latency, and can provide different levels of intelligence. So that's a really, this whole thing is fascinating. It's, by the way, also one of the ways, it's very interesting to think about how alien this kind of, in some ways, these models are already smarter than humans because they're more multidisciplinary. Right. It's very difficult for a human to, be an expert in, even if you're a doctor, you really have to specialize. You can.
Does it excite you or scare you?
Oh, it excites me. I'm not. Are you? No,
I'm not scared. I just want. We do talk about sort of human. What it's going to mean to be a human when this is all.
Well, so I've had this conversation with various people about what it means to be human, and people say, well, if AI is smarter than us, better than us at various things, won't that take the meaning out of your life, or some question along those lines? And I said, look, I consider myself to be a very good writer, but I know people who are much better writers than I am. And in fact, I don't think there's any single thing that I'm the best in the world at. If I'm being really honest with myself, I can always find somebody. I know people who are better than me at math. I know, people who are better than me at dancing, that's for sure. So, they're like, literally I go right down the line and I can always find somebody better. And yet that doesn't take meaning from it. If you only get meaning because you're the best in the world at something, then very few of us are going to have meaning in our lives. There isn't going to be a lot of meaning. And really your meaning is coming from your relationships, how uplifting people. So like if you think about it, by the way, that uplifting can be very local.
Do you think
it's like if you're just uplifting your brother and sister, you're uplifting your kids, you're uplifting, your friends and the people in your community, you're going to get meaning from that.
Do you think technology has made that better or worse? We were talking to Prince Harry earlier. He clearly thinks that social media, and are you on social media?
I am on social media sometimes.
You say sometimes.
Well, I am not addicted to social media. I go in and look and I try to mine it for ideas sometimes, and it's a lot of work to find the little nuggets where there are some. Like I follow a bunch of people who I think are really smart, And if I can stay just on those, but invariably the algorithm captures my attention and takes me down a different path.
But you're very good. I've seen you. You're very good at compartmentalizing. Meaning, you will put the phone down.
I never pick up my.
Is that a natural act, though?
It's easy for me. I'm a serial multitasker, so I'm very, very focused. When I was in Montessori school, they told my mom that I was problematic because I wouldn't switch tasks. And my teacher would have to pick my whole chair up and move me in my chair to the next task. And so it's easy for me. If I'm at dinner with friends, I'm at dinner. I do not
an amazing thing.
It's not hard for me. That is not hard for me. I'm a good focuser.
That's hard for me. Two other things before we go. There are these different buckets. Obviously, we've talked about Blue Origin, which you spend a lot of your time on now, and Amazon. And then I see you making investments in robotics and AI and other things, and obviously the Earth Fund. What is the day like for you? How do you sort of see it?
I work from about 9 to 7 in meetings. I mean, it's meetings from 9 to 7. It's and then I have a bunch of documents I read outside of that. I get energy from that. It is. I've always done that. You can't start a company unless you're willing to work really hard, and not all the work is fun. That's why they call it work. A lot of it is fun, but I always tell people, if you get half your job to be fun, you're crushing it. That you got to have your expectations set right. If you come out of college and think like 100% of your job is going to be fun, you're setting yourself up for disappointment.
Here's my final question for you. You don't do this that often.
You mean do these interviews?
Do interviews.
No, very
infrequently.
Very rare.
And I'm curious because you must read about yourself occasionally. A little bit through social media.
Oh, I definitely see things sometimes, like with the non-endorsement decision. That wasn't very nice of some people.
So I'm curious what you think the world misunderstands about you. We all read about you all the time. We see you in pictures and all sorts of things everywhere. And I'm curious what you think when you sort of see the projected version of Jeff Bezos and the real Jeff Bezos. It's actually the reason I wanted you to be here today, because I've had the opportunity to get to know you over the years. I'm curious, though, from your vantage point, what you see as the thing that the public doesn't.
Well, what an interesting... I wasn't expecting any questions like this. Let me think about this. It's... I gave up on being well understood a long time ago. I kind of thought... I realized it was it would take so much energy, and you'd probably still fail.
To be understood.
To be understood is too difficult. It's as a public figure. It's hard enough, by the way, to be well understood by your loved ones. By your kids and your close family members and your closest friends. Even that is difficult. It takes a lot of energy. Right. And I think to be well understood by the world, I would posit to you that if you think you understand any public figure, you probably don't. There may be some exceptions where the people, I don't know, maybe like Oprah when she had her show, because she really was, you saw her so often. Right. And in so many different circumstances that maybe you got a real sense of her. And, I know her and she does seem like the woman on her show. I think there are these rare cases where people end up defining themselves. But mostly you end up defined by a small set of things that catch, as a public figure, that catch people's attention. And they just dominate the entire conversation. In my case, it would be wealth or something like this. People would say, it's very hard if you're, I had a very funny moment on stage with Bill Gates once. It was shortly after I had become the wealthiest person in the world, and I had taken that title from Bill, a title which I had, I promise you, I had never sought. And we were being interviewed, the two of us, by I can't remember who the moderator was, but He said, Bill, how do you feel about this guy stealing your #1 wealthiest person title? And before Bill could answer, I looked at Bill and said, you're welcome. Because, of course, it's actually just that particular thing tends to be dominant in our culture. Kind of people over-focus on it, and then they think you're focused on it, which isn't really true. In my case, I think of myself as an inventor. That's what I am. And I wake up every day and I follow my curiosity and I explore. And I really am an inventor. I'm very good at that. I'm a very good lateral thinker, and I love problems, and I love a whiteboard, and I love having a team of other smart people, and we work together and we find unusual solutions to things. And that's how I think of myself. So like if I could somehow have a Forbes list of inventors, and if I could climb my way to the top of that inventor list, that's what would make me, and then I'd be understood, or at least in part. But I think you have to decide too as a public figure, how much energy do you want to put into being understood? Because you can spend a lot of time and it probably still wouldn't work. So, it probably helps to do an occasional interview like this. I did Lex Friedman, and I've done a couple of things. And so you don't want to be so mysterious that nobody ever sees you, and you want to be the Howard Hughes or whatever. You don't want to be a recluse completely. But I really value my time. I work very hard. I care deeply about the things I work on. And every minute I'm doing something like this is a minute I am not doing something else. Not that I'm not happy to do this. I am. And I have enjoyed it. And you're very good at it.
Thank you, Jeffrey Bezos. Jeff Bezos, thank you so much. $1 billion. And I should say, here's where I want to start. 2 years ago, almost to this week, basically, you launched ChatGPT. And I think it's fair to say that when you press the button, since then, all hell has broken loose. It
does feel like that.
It has changed the global conversation. It has changed fundraising, priorities, the move of resources. Other technology companies have shifted the way they're doing things. There have been lawsuits, all of it. And so I'm very curious if you could just take us back 2 years ago, literally almost, as I said, to the day or to the week, and what you thought was going to happen when you pressed the button.
So in the abstract, we always knew there would be some moment where, for whatever reason, like the world would go from not getting it to getting it. And that all of a sudden it would be clear that this technology was working. Like internally, it at that point seemed very obvious to us that language models were going to keep scaling, they were going to do all these useful things. And why it happened at the launch of ChatGPT, I have some theories, but why it happened then and not when we launched the GPT-3 and the API earlier, or why it didn't happen until GPT-4 launched several months later, like why that exact moment, I think there is some like chanciness to when it actually catches fire. We had observed, though, with the API and GPT-3 that, GPT-3 was a little bit early and it didn't work for that many things, but in some sense, one of the killer use cases of it was developers in the playground, which is where you could like test ideas quickly before you implement the API. They loved just talking to the model. They would just sit there and like talk to GPT-3 conversationally about whatever. And that was kind of the main thing people were using it for. So we said, well, if that's what people want, we can make it much easier to use. You don't have to sign up for a developer account and do all these other things. And we can sort of tune it to be good at conversations. And so we said, okay, let's make this as a product. Now, we'd actually been planning to launch it with GPT-4. We finished GPT-4 in like August of 2022, but we held it for a while.
But did you expect all of this to happen?
Again, at some point, we thought there would be a big moment in the world. Did we know it was going to be right then with the launch of ChatGPT? Certainly not.
So here we are now, 2 years later, and the next big question that we're all asking, I can't even believe we're just asking it 2 years later, and you actually just wrote about it. You said that it is possible that we will have superintelligence in a few thousand days from now. 2 years ago, did you think that? And when you say a few thousand days, I can do various versions of math on what that means.
Well, I mean, there is wide uncertainty, and there's also different definitions of what superintelligence is. Yes, 2 years ago, we thought we were on a pretty steep curve. I mean, we started OpenAI because we thought this was possible and maybe not that far away. And it has gone well, but we hoped it was going to go well. Like, we believed in deep learning as this unbelievable new discovery of humanity, and we thought it could go here, and we had a duty to get it here and to make it go well and to broadly share the benefits. But yeah, we did think we could get here, and we still believe we can get here. It's not for sure. There's a ton of hard work, a ton of research and engineering still to do, but I think it's possible. And I think it's possible not super far in the future. I expect that in 2025, we will have systems that people look at, even people who are skeptical of current progress, and say, wow, I did not expect that. That does change what.
Like what?
Agents are the thing everyone is talking about, I think for good reason. You know, this idea that you can give an AI system a pretty complicated task, like a kind of task you'd give to a very smart human that takes a while to go off and do and use a bunch of tools and create something of value. That's the kind of thing I'd expect next year. And that's like a huge deal. We talk about that like, oh, you know, this thing is going to happen. But that's like, if that works as well as we hope it does, that can really transform things.
Okay, so what are we supposed to think? There's been a whole bunch of headlines in the past couple of weeks where people have talked actually about maybe that the scaling laws of AI actually are slowing down. And you put out this, I don't know if it was cryptic or it was very direct. You put out a tweet where you wrote, "There is no wall."
I don't see how it could be any less cryptic than that. Like, that was an attempt not to be cryptic at all and say, hey, this is going to keep going. In fact, hopefully this will put it to rest, at least for a while. I've always been struck by how much people love to speculate on, is there a wall? Is scaling going to keep going? And like, rather than just like look at the curve of progress and say, maybe I shouldn't bet against an exponential like that. In any case, we have a bunch of new great stuff. So we're doing this kind of fun thing for the holidays. We're doing 12 days of OpenAI starting tomorrow, where we're going to launch. We'll either launch something or do a demo every day for the next like 12 weekdays. And without saying too much about the thing for tomorrow, it is continued progress.
And can you give us a little bit more of a hint then if it's going to start tomorrow? Start today, right now.
I don't want to spoil your surprise. It's not that long to wait.
I'm not good with that. I want to know. One of the big questions about AI right now, though, is, and this goes to the scaling question, is how much data and what it takes to actually continue to scale. How much of this is about just pure processing power and therefore capital, right? Versus data, where you get that data, this idea of synthetic data, digital data, that we're going to recreate data on top of data. What does it actually take to scale at this point? When people even talk about some of the limiting factors, I think that there's some question embedded in that about which piece is going to get there.
So the three key inputs, and there are others too, but the three key ones are compute, data, and algorithms. And you can trade them off sometimes. Like if you have much better data, you could use less compute, or if you have a lot more compute, you could use that to create synthetic data and make more data. For a while, there was incredible easy gains in front of us with compute. More recently, we've had a lot of algorithmic gains. But kind of, you want to push on all of those inputs at the same time. And at different times, there may be differential returns to one or the other, but I kind of think of all three.
But for you, compute, I assume, is the biggie? And if you don't have the compute, all the others don't matter.
I mean, in some sense, algorithmic progress is the biggie. The biggest one. You know, if you can, like, maybe you can double the size of a computer, maybe over time with crazy amounts of capital, you can 10x the size of a computer. Once in a while, these 1000x gains come along algorithmically. The transformer is like a good recent example of that. That's rare, but that is the biggest gain when it happens.
So right now, there's an arms race, it feels like, for processing power, right? There's an arms race for fundraising for processing power. There's an arms race to build and get more compute. You have a relationship with Microsoft, and you rely on them right now.
I think there's a race on all of these things. The compute one is like the most fun, the most theatrical, the biggest numbers. It gets the most attention. It is really important. I don't want to dismiss it. But there's certainly also huge amounts of effort going into who can come up with the best algorithmic ideas, who can secure new data sources. So I think it is on all three fronts.
You do have this relationship with Microsoft.
Yeah.
It has been described as, at times it's been described as a tech bromance in the best way possible. And then I was just reading Alex Heath, who wrote, it's clear that Microsoft and OpenAI are disentangling.
I don't think we're disentangling. Look, I will not pretend that there are no misalignments or challenges. Obviously, there are some. But on the whole, I think it's been a tremendously positive thing for both companies, and excited to do like much, much more together.
But long term, do you think you need to have your own processing power that's yours, as opposed to relying on somebody else?
No, and in fact, I think we need to ensure that we get enough compute of the kind we want that we can rely on and all of that. And there may be reasons we have like some very crazy ideas about things we'd like to build that are, like high risk, high reward. But we certainly don't need to have like OpenAI get really good at building like massive scale data centers. In fact, one of the things, and maybe this is a consequence of kind of just like how I grew up, but I grew up as one of those like startup founders of the generation where it was like, oh, before that period in time, everybody had to build their own hardware, and you had these colos and data centers, and it was this thing you had to do, and then all of a sudden AWS changed the scene.
Right.
And so I've always thought that way. I'm open to us, saying, okay, we are going to have to build stuff ourselves, or maybe vertical integration turns out to be more important over time. But it's really nice to get to focus on research and product and do what we're good at.
But one of the reasons I ask is it creates this sort of frenemy situation, I imagine, where you have your product. I was actually using it to check out a couple things just yesterday.
How'd it do?
Great.
Happy to hear it.
By the way, we're going to have Sundar here later. The search product is fascinating, what you're doing.
It is really cool. I have to say, that's my favorite product we've launched. Thank you for saying that. It's my favorite product we've launched in a long time. I use it so much, and I'm so happy with it. It has completely changed my usage of the internet.
But where I was going with this is you have this relationship where you have Microsoft that's using your product in Copilot. You now have Apple using your product. And then you have your own version of a sort of native product that you sell commercially yourself. At some point, do the interests no longer become aligned? And I say that because there's been some reporting, including in the New York Times, that suggested there has been frustrations about how much processing power and access you're getting, different requirements of things and services that folks at OpenAI are supposed to use that are Microsoft products and maybe they don't want to use. I'm just trying to understand all that.
There's definitely, at various times, real compute crunches. Again, our product has scaled. 2 years ago, we had almost no business. Now we have more than 300 million weekly active users. We have, users are sending more than 1 billion messages a day to ChatGPT. We have a very large developer business. I think it's 1.3 million US developers, many more in the world. So we need lots of compute, more than we projected. And that's just been an unusual thing in the history of business to scale that quickly. And there's been tension around that. I have not heard people upset about using Microsoft services, though. We have a big platform business. We have a big first-party business. Many other companies manage both of those things. And we have things that we're really good at. Microsoft has things they're really good at. Again, there's not no tension, but on the whole, I think our incentives are pretty aligned.
sounds like there's a little bit of tension.
For sure.
On the artificial general intelligence piece, though, because you always said part of your deal with them is that if you ever get there, right, that then the deal could technically be called off. It sounds like you might be getting close.
We've also said that our intention is to treat AGI as a mile marker along the way. We have left ourselves some flexibility because we don't know what will happen. But my guess is we will hit AGI sooner than most people in the world think, and it will matter much less. And a lot of the safety concerns that we and others expressed actually don't come at the AGI moment. It's like AGI can get built, the world goes on mostly the same way, the economy moves faster, things grow faster. But then there is a long continuation from sort of what we call AGI to what we call superintelligence.
And that's when we should get worried. I mean, I remember when even in the past couple of years, you were in Washington and other places telling us that we should be nervous.
So first of all, even at the AGI moment, I think there are things to be nervous about. I expect the economic disruption to take a little longer than people think because there's a lot of inertia in society, but then to be more intense than people think. So the first couple of years, maybe not that much changes, and then maybe a lot changes in the economy. I'm not a believer in the no work. I think we'll always find things to do, and with every major technological revolution, there's a lot of job turnover. But I would bet we will have never seen it go this fast. So I think there's things like that to worry about in the relatively near term.
But not these super dangerous things.
That stuff I think is further out than a system that can, Do
you have any faith that the government or somebody is going to figure out how to avoid that?
I have faith that researchers will figure out how to avoid that. I mean, there are going to be some. Let me caveat that a little bit. I think there's a set of technical problems that the smartest people in the world are going to work on. And, I'm a little bit too optimistic by nature, but I assume that they're going to figure that out. And we're working super hard. Others are working super hard. I think there's a lot of work in front of us, but I also think we have this we have this incredible piece of science called deep learning that can help us solve these very hard problems. I assume we'll get that right. The societal issues around not just AGI, not the thing that we think will come in a few years that can do a bunch of jobs and create a lot of economic value, but like true superintelligence, the system that is not just smarter than you or smarter than me, but smarter than all of us put together, just unbelievable capability. Even if we can make that technically safe, which I assume we'll figure out, we are going to have some faith in our governments. There are going to have to be some policy issues around that. There is going to have to be global coordination to a degree that I assume will rise to the occasion, but seems challenging.
Okay, so here's the safety question, and we've all read the headlines. You've been in the headlines. Over the past year or 2 years, there have been so many people, both inside OpenAI, who've either left or spoken out or other things where they say, these guys are not focused on safety enough, right?
Yeah.
There's trust questions. Just speak to it so we understand. When people say that there's not enough focus on safety, you think what? What is that? What is not happening that is supposed to be happening?
Well, I would point to our track record. I would say, we talked about, we got this like big product out there. This is a very new technology, moving very quickly. It started off as something that we did not know how we were going to align very well. And it is now generally considered by most of society to be acceptably safe and acceptably robust. Safety, that's always like a contract negotiated by a whole bunch of stakeholders. It's maybe hard to like exactly define what it means for ChatGPT to be safe.
But the reason I ask is when we hear, different people who have left the organization and they've gone public, they take to Twitter and they say, these folks are not focused on safety. Is that about resources on safety? Is that about processing power? Is that about your attention?
There are definitely people who think that ChatGPT is not sufficiently safe, that it allows things that it shouldn't or doesn't do things that it should. Or there are people who will push on parts of that. There are people who will say, fine, ChatGPT, maybe that's like a little bit safer than we thought it was going to be, but what's the plan for the next system? What are we going to do about that? And also there are people who would say, like, putting out a system like this at all is unsafe because OpenAI accelerated a race in the world. and that gives us less time to work on safety. And so we believe, and this is an opinionated stance, that this idea of iterative deployment is really important. We got to put these systems out into the world. Society and the technology have to co-evolve. You have to start while the stakes are lower. You have to understand how people are going to use this and what it doesn't work for, what it does. There are other people who say, sure, there's some benefits there, but it's not worth the costs.
Right. Let me ask you a different question, and maybe it goes back to the issue of processing power. And I was going to mention Elon Musk is building his own processing, these huge processing power labs, effectively to power XAI. And one of the reasons I was asking whether you needed your own is because it seems like everybody is getting their own. We were just talking before to Ken about Elon Musk. Elon Musk has a sort of unusual relationship in your life over the years, both as a founder and somebody who's suing the company now. How much do you see XAI as a competitor? We talk about Google, obviously, all the time. And we talk about Anthropic and, to some degree, Microsoft. And I don't know where you think Amazon is. We'll talk to Jeff Bezos this afternoon. But how do you see that?
They're a competitor.
Do you think of them as one of your biggest competitors? I mean, it appears that they are coming on super strong.
Yeah, I assume they'll be a really serious competitor.
Did you expect that?
Yes.
You did?
Yes.
And what are they doing? And what are they doing? And how have they been able to literally spin up a company that feels, I'm not claiming it's comparable to what you're doing, but getting super close, super fast? Meaning, what is that?
Well, a lot of the models at the frontier are all pretty close now. But certainly tremendous respect for how quickly they built that data center.
Is that, by the way, do you fear that all this becomes commoditized as a result? I mean, if it seems like, I'm not saying anybody can do it, but it just seems like, what is your advantage? And by the way, what is your disadvantage?
I think the technology itself, to the degree you believe deep learning is just sort of like a law of physics, and that we discovered an important new piece of science, then yes, that part will be done by lots of people. Everybody has their analogy for what AI is like. I saw Sundar is going to be here. He talks about it like electricity. A whole bunch of others. People talk about like the Industrial Revolution. Some people talk about like the Renaissance. The one I like is the transistor. There was a scientific discovery that a few companies discovered first, that transformed our society, that scaled unbelievably well. Like, when people talk about scaling laws, the best analogy for that, I think, is Moore's Law. And that came to be used by a lot of companies in all of the world. Like, look at all the things in this room with transistors, but we don't think about that as a transistor device, and we don't think about Google as a transistor company, even though they wouldn't be here without one. And I kind of think that's what's going to happen with AI. There will be shockingly capable models, widely available, used for everything. And it will be inconceivable to people in the future that the devices, the products and services they use are not really smart. And they won't all call themselves AI companies or AI products. And in that sense, in some sense, the AI itself, the reasoning engine nature of it will become commoditized. And that's fine, that's good. Like, science should be just diffused throughout society. And that's why we're focused on building things like ChatGPT.
One of the other questions, and it is Elon related, is you are now moving towards having a for-profit component part of your business. Right now it's a not-for-profit. And he, as everybody knows, if you read the papers, is suing you over this and many other things. How do you feel? I actually just want to ask you on a very personal level, forgetting about even the merits of the case. As a guy who has spent a lot of time with him and you guys founded this thing together, how do you feel personally today about all this? Just as a human.
Tremendously sad. I grew up with Elon as like a mega hero. I thought what Elon was doing was absolutely incredible for the world. And I'm still, of course, I have different feelings about him now, but I'm still glad he exists. And not just because, no, I mean that genuinely. Not just because I think his companies are awesome, which I do think, but because I think he, at a time when most of the world was not thinking very ambitiously, he pushed a lot of people, me included, to think much more ambitiously. And I'm grateful is the wrong kind of word, but I'm thankful, I'm positive about that. We started OpenAI together, and then at some point he totally lost faith in OpenAI and decided to go his own way. And that's fine too, but I think of Elon as a builder and someone who, known thing about Elon, he really cares about being the guy. But I think of him as someone that if he's not, that just competes in the market and in technology and whatever else, and doesn't resort to lawfare. And, whatever the stated complaint is, what I believe is he's just he's a competitor and we're doing well. And that's sad to see.
I got to ask you this, though. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal. You were in it. Jeff Bezos was in it. And some of the other people who are his main competitors were in it. And there was speculation in the article that folks like yourself were worried about his influence, not just his influence in the technology area, but given his close relationship now with the president-elect.
I'm actually not. I believe that pretty strongly, it may turn out to be wrong, but I believe pretty strongly that Elon will do the right thing and that Americans, it'd be profoundly un-American to use political power to the degree that Elon has it to hurt your competitors and advantage your own businesses. And I don't think people would tolerate that. I don't think Elon would do it.
Right.
It would go, again, lots of things not to like about him, but it would go so deeply against the values I believe he holds very dear to himself that I'm not that worried about it.
Okay, one last related question on that, and then I actually want to talk a different tech question and about the company, which is one of the things that he alleged is that he thinks that you guys are now so big that there's not competition and that you're trying to prevent competition from happening by preventing potential funders of, for example, XAI or arguably others from both funding you and funding them at the same time.
Incorrect. What we said, which is very standard, and what we say is, if you invest in us and want to invest in any of our competitors, that's totally fine. We stop your information rights. You can still do it, but is a very standard term for other companies of our scale. We're going to stop telling you our research roadmap. And everybody is that seems reasonable. But again, it's you want to go invest in them, go invest.
Let me ask you a different question just about the company. You did start it as a not-for-profit. It was a research outfit originally.
Yeah.
Now, I think there's a view that it has to shift to be some kind of profit-oriented company.
Well,
does it have to?
First of all, I like to talk about the reason we started as a nonprofit because I think it sort of speaks to the answer too. When we started, we did not have any idea that we were going to be a product company. We also did not know that the amount of capital we needed would turn out to be so huge. If we did know those things, we would have picked a different structure. It's hard to overstate, because it wasn't that long ago on the calendar, but it's hard to overstate how different 2016 was. This was years before we had the research that led to language models. This was 4.5 years before we launched our first product. This was 6.5 years before we launched ChatGPT. All we knew that we wanted to do was do some AI research, and that we thought AGI and superintelligence eventually would be this important thing to the world. And we wanted to somehow do something that would be good. At the time we were working on writing papers, new RL algorithms, new theories, a way to play video games, a robotic hand. And it was not clear that there would ever be a product or revenue stream at all. And it wasn't clear that we were going to need one because it wasn't clear we needed so much money.
Right.
It became clear after GPT-1 and some other work that we were going to need to scale. And we started, and also Elon decided to stop funding us as a nonprofit, and we couldn't get somebody else to do it, that we needed to find a way to make a capped profit. Now, we wanted to keep going with a lot of the things that we think are good about a nonprofit, And so we had this subsidiary, Capped Profit, that worked for a while. And in some senses still does kind of work, and in some other senses is like straining the theory of what a nonprofit controlled org can be and the amount of capital we need at this next stage. So we are, and have been for a while, looking at some changes. Nothing is decided. It is, as you can imagine, like very complicated to figure this out. And the board is like hard at work on it. In any configuration, like the nonprofit doesn't go away. Like one thing that the board has looked at, for example, is a PBC that a nonprofit owns a huge chunk of and then figures out how to use that amount of wealth for the purpose of the nonprofit. There's other ideas too.
One of the things I've always been fascinated by is you never took equity in the company.
I think you think about that more than I do.
I'm surprised. You get paid $76,000, I looked.
I believe you.
And that's it. If the company does have one of these moments, there's an expectation you will get some equity.
There was much of press about that, and there's been like some investor pressure. It is weird that I didn't get equity.
Did you want it? You didn't want it,
No,
though.
I didn't want it. If I could go back in time, I would have taken it, just some little bit, just to never have to answer this question. And no matter how many times I try to explain to people, like, I have the most interesting, coolest job in the world. This is like my retirement dream way to spend my time after like what was a pretty good career. And people can work on like art projects and not get paid for that, and no one thinks it's weird or whatever. It just does not come across. So I wish I had taken some. I don't imagine I would work any harder or less hard. There would be like, I think, something clearer about the alignment I would have had with investors or whatever else, and it would have like, it definitely would have been easier to raise money. Like there are plenty of investors who have not invested because I didn't take equity.
They say, really, that's interesting. They will not invest because you don't have equity.
It's come up a few times, yeah.
So if it's now the company's $157 billion, what do you think is a good number for yourself if it happens?
Again, I think you think about it more. You got it.
We're going to run out of time, so I have to ask a couple other quick questions. One is, and at full disclosure, we should say, it just so happens.
Can I say one more thing on that point before you go? I know we're out. I'll be quick. Like, this is my childhood dream job. Like, not every day, like not day to day. I would rather not like, be beating my head against the wall all the time. But getting to work on AGI and like getting to like sit in the room with the smartest researchers in the world and go on this crazy adventure, like that is what I always wanted to do. That was like my literal childhood dream. And that is, all of the weirdness aside, I think it should at least be understandable that that is worth more to me than any additional money.
Fair enough. Thank you. Let me ask you this, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention it. It just so happens that the New York Times Company has a lawsuit against OpenAI and Microsoft over training on content. And there's a lot of content creators and other folks in this room who make their living off of content. And I'm just so curious, and I know you can't speak to the lawsuit itself, but for those folks who are in this room who've written books or written articles or made movies or what have you, that have had their information trained on, whether it was on the open web or the closed web or on YouTube or what have you, how we should feel.
I think we do need a new deal, standard, protocol, whatever you want to call it, for how creators are going to get rewarded. I very much believe in the right to learn, or whatever you want to call it, and that if an AI reads something, a physics textbook, and learn physics, it can use that for other things like a human can. I think those parts of copyright law and fair use really need to keep applying. But I think there's additional things that we're starting to explore, and others are, where, a particular passion of mine has always been, can we figure out how to do micropayments where if you generate a story in the style of Andrew Ross Sorkin, you can opt into that for your name and likeness and style to be used and get paid for it. There's many other ideas too. I think the discussion on fair use or not is at the wrong level. And of course, we very much believe in you need one of these right-to-learn approaches. But the part I really agree with is we need to find new economic models where creators can have new revenue streams. On the New York Times, look, I don't believe in showing up in someone else's house as a guest and being rude. But I will say, I think the New York Times is on the wrong side of history in many ways.
We could discuss and debate that, and we'll do that, I think, in court.
Look forward to seeing you.
My final question for you actually has almost nothing to do with technology, but maybe it does, which is you have a very exciting thing that's happening in your life personally in the next year, which is having a child.
Yeah.
And for all parents out there and would-be parents who are thinking about AI and what this is going to do to our life and what even what our own meaning is as people, if the machine actually can do things that we really can't. What we're supposed to do, how we're supposed to think about it, what it does to our own dignity. What do you think when you have your child and you're thinking and talking to that child, what do you think you're going to be telling them about this new world we're about to enter?
There's nothing like, I'm sure having a kid will be even stronger, but just even really getting ready to have a kid, there's nothing like, at least for me, there's been nothing that has made AGI seem so irrelevant. And the level of excitement I have about AGI, I thought was pretty high, but it's so much higher about having a kid. It really puts into perspective what actually matters. And I think that is a